February 27th, 1943. The mountains of Telemark lie under a moonlit sky. A cutting wind sweeps across the plateau, scattering snow over 9 dark figures gliding silently on skis. Their breath steams in the cold. Their mission is simple to describe and almost impossible to survive. Break into a fortress built into a cliff, destroy the heart of the Nazi atomic program, and vanish without a trace. Below them, half hidden by cloud, a concrete plant clings to the mountainside. Vemork. Inside, a colorless liquid trickles through pipes of steel, deuterium oxide, heavy water. It looks harmless. It could decide the future of the world. The men carry packs stuffed with explosives, rations, and the last letters to their families. They have trained for months in Britain under the Special Operations Executive, learning to survive off the land, to ski through storms, to fight in silence. Most are in their 20s. None expects to see spring. As they descend toward the valley, the glow of the plant grows brighter. Searchlights sweep the gorge. Guards pace between the buildings. Beyond the river stands a single narrow bridge, one way in, one way out. If they are discovered, there will be no rescue, no surrender, only the mountains and the snow. For a moment, the leader, Joachim Rönneberg, stops to study the layout below. He whispers to the others, "We go on foot from here." The group unstraps their skis, shouldering the weight of destiny as they vanish into the dark. 4 years earlier, Europe had plunged into chaos. September 1st, 1939. German troops crossed into Poland, and within days the Second World War began. Nations mobilized armies, but another race was already underway. One fought in laboratories. Scientists had split the atom. Now the question was, who could turn that discovery into a weapon? In Berlin, under Werner Heisenberg, German physicists began experiments in nuclear fission. To sustain a reaction, they needed a moderator, a material that could slow neutrons without absorbing them. Only one substance worked perfectly, heavy water, and only one place in Europe produced it, the Norsk hydro plant at Vemork, Norway. When Germany invaded Norway in April 1940, they seized the plant intact. Shipments of heavy water were soon bound for the Reich. To the Allies, that meant one thing. Hitler's scientists were closer than anyone to building an atomic bomb. In London, alarm spread through intelligence circles. The British chiefs of staff concluded that Vemork had to be destroyed. The order went to the Special Operations Executive, the same group that would later train Rönneberg's team. Their motto, "Set Europe ablaze." The first attempt came in November 1942, Operation Freshman. 2 gliders carrying British engineers were to land near the plant, guided by a small Norwegian advance team. But storms tore across southern Norway. Ice coated the wings, tow cables snapped, and both gliders crashed in the mountains. Those who survived were captured. Hitler had decreed that all commandos caught in sabotage missions were to be executed. None returned. For months, 4 stranded Norwegians from the advance team, codenamed Grouse, hid on the Hardangervidda plateau. They hunted reindeer, melted snow for water, and waited for word from London. Hunger gnawed, frostbite blackened their feet, yet they refused to abandon the mission. Their survival kept hope alive. Now, in February 1943, a second operation was underway. Operation Gunnerside. This time, every man would be Norwegian. Every move would rely on stealth and precision. Their orders were clear. Infiltrate Vemork, destroy the heavy water production cells, and escape across the mountains before dawn. The men skiing through the night know the odds, but they also know what failure means. If Germany gains the atomic bomb, entire cities could vanish in a flash. The balance of the world could collapse. And so, through the endless snow, they keep moving. Through the endless snow, they keep moving, step by step, hour after hour, until the mountains finally open to a narrow gorge. Far below, the river Mona twists between cliffs of ice. Across it stands their target, the hydroelectric plant at Vimork, its windows glowing like lanterns against the dark rock. The men crouch in the snow, their hearts hammering. Guards pace along the bridge. A dog barks somewhere near the powerhouse. The air is brittle with frost. One wrong move, one sound too loud, and the entire German garrison will descend upon them. There is no turning back. Joachim Rönneberg checks his watch. Midnight. He signals the team to move. They circle wide, avoiding the bridge, heading toward a ravine that drops steeply toward the river. There, in the shadows, they find a single cable used by maintenance workers to cross the gorge. One by one, they slide down the slope, crawl along the frozen stream, and climb the opposite bank. The snow creaks beneath them. Every breath feels like glass. They reach the outer fence. Wire cutters flash once in the dark, silent, precise. A hole opens, just large enough for a man to slip through. Inside the perimeter, the group divides. Two men take positions to guard the bridge, ready to cover their escape. The others creep toward the main building. Through the frosted windows, they can see guards drinking coffee, unaware of what approaches. Rönneberg leads the way into the basement. They find the heavy water room, a maze of pipes, tanks, and humming valves. The air smells of oil and metal. He opens his pack, removes a set of small, pencil-shaped charges, and begins to place them carefully around the electrolytic cells. Each is fitted with a fuse timed for 30 seconds. The men work quickly, almost silently, their gloves slick with cold sweat. When all the charges are set, Rönneberg whispers, "Ready?" A single nod. He strikes the fuse. The faint hiss begins. The team turns and runs. They race back through the tunnels, across the snow, down to the riverbed. Behind them, a muffled thump breaks the night. Then another. Flames bloom through the factory windows. The explosions echo across the valley, rolling like distant thunder. The job is done. By dawn, the saboteurs are gone, vanished into the white wilderness. Not a single life was lost on either side. The plant lies crippled, its machinery wrecked, production halted. When German troops arrive hours later, they find the damage devastating and precise. Whoever did this knew exactly what to destroy. In Berlin, panic spreads through the Nuclear Research Division. Weeks of production lost, months of repair needed. Heisenberg's team demands answers. More guards are sent to Norway, patrols doubled, curfews tightened. But the saboteurs are ghosts. They split into smaller groups and melt into the mountains, surviving on snow and dried meat, evading search parties that comb the valleys for weeks. Some eventually make it to Sweden, others remain hidden within Norway's vast wilderness. The success of Operation Gunnerside sends shockwaves across Europe. For the first time, a small resistance team has struck a decisive blow against the Nazi war machine. Allied leaders celebrate quietly. Their enemy, furious, begins to rebuild. Despite the damage, the Germans repair Vemork within months. Production of heavy water resumes, slower but still functioning. Once again, trains begin to roll out of the valley, carrying barrels toward the Reich. In London, intelligence officers debate their next move. The first mission was a triumph, but it may not have been enough. The Germans still have the plant. Still, they work toward a bomb. The Allies can't allow that. So, new plans are drawn, bombing raids, sabotage attempts, interception of shipments. The war for heavy water isn't over. It has only shifted into a new phase. For the people of Norway, life under occupation grows darker. The Gestapo tightens its hold, hunting members of the resistance. Arrests, interrogations, and executions become part of daily life. Yet the spirit of defiance refuses to die. In secret, messages pass through the underground network, coded letters, invisible ink, whispers in safe houses. Every act of rebellion, no matter how small, reminds the occupiers that Norway will not bow. Among those still in hiding is Knut Haukelid, one of the original saboteurs. When word reaches him that the Germans plan to move the remaining heavy water by ferry across Lake Tinn, he knows what must be done. If the barrels reach Germany, everything they sacrificed will be undone. He gathers a handful of local resistance fighters, their new target, the ferry Hydro. February 20th, 1944. Lake Tinn lies frozen under the pale Norwegian sun. On its icy surface, the ferry Hydro waits by the dock, engines rumbling softly, smoke curling into the morning air. Below deck, German soldiers load wooden barrels, ordinary in appearance, but each one filled with a liquid that could change the fate of the world, heavy water from the Vemork plant. To the Germans, this is just another transport. To the Norwegian resistance, it's the final chance to stop Hitler's atomic dream. In the nearby hills, Knut Haukelid watches through binoculars. He's tired, gaunt from months of hiding, but his eyes burn with determination. Every sound from the port carries across the still air, the bark of orders, the clang of barrels, the splash of ice against the hull. He whispers to his small team, "Tonight, the lake will keep its secret." As darkness falls, they move quietly toward the dock. The plan is simple, deadly, and irreversible. They will plant explosives deep in the hull, set to detonate when the ferry reaches the middle of the lake. The passengers, some civilians, weigh heavy on Haukelid's conscience. But he knows the cost of failure. If these barrels reach Germany, the war could change forever. They slip aboard under the cover of night. The guards are relaxed, unaware that death moves among them. In the cargo hold, Haukelid crouches beside the steel beams, attaching his explosives with calm precision. He sets the timer, 7.5 hours, enough for the ferry to reach deep water, far from the shore. Before leaving, he looks back once more. Then, like ghosts, they vanish into the snow. Morning breaks cold and still. The Hydro departs as usual, cutting through the icy surface of the lake. The passengers huddle inside against the wind. The soldiers laugh unaware. The barrels of heavy water creak softly with the motion of the ship. Halfway across, at exactly 10:45 a.m., a dull thud shakes the hull. A second later, silence, then a roar. The explosion tears through the lower deck, splitting the ferry's spine. Steam bursts upward as water floods in. The Hydro lurches violently to one side. Passengers scream, soldiers shout orders, but the lake is merciless. Within minutes, the ship sinks beneath the surface, swallowed by dark water and shards of ice. When it's over, the heavy water lies buried at the bottom of Lake Tinn, beyond recovery. News of the sinking spreads quickly. The Germans launch an investigation, but they find no proof of sabotage. The resistance remains invisible, and Haukelid disappears once more into the mountains. The mission's cost is tragic, 14 lives lost, both soldiers and civilians, but its impact is decisive. With the ferry gone and the Vemork plant crippled, Germany's supply of heavy water is effectively cut off. The Nazi atomic project is set back months, perhaps years. By the time the Allies land in Normandy that summer, the race for the bomb has already turned. Across the Atlantic, in secret laboratories, American scientists of the Manhattan Project surge ahead, powered by uranium and plutonium rather than deuterium. Heisenberg's team, starved of resources and material, falls hopelessly behind. The tide of war shifts. As 1945 dawns, German forces in Norway retreat under pressure. The occupation crumbles, and word spreads through the resistance. The war is ending. When the surrender comes in May, it feels almost unreal. After 5 years of silence, fear, and sacrifice, Norway is free again. For the men of the sabotage teams, the victory is bittersweet. Many of their comrades never returned. The mountains they once crossed in darkness now stand quiet, bearing only the wind as witness. In the years that follow, the story of the Heavy Water Sabotage becomes legend, a tale of courage and ingenuity that helped prevent a nightmare. Historians will debate how close Germany truly came to the bomb, but one truth remains unshaken. If those missions had failed, the world might look very different today. In the post-war years, Runneberg, Haukelid, and the surviving members live humble lives, rarely speaking of what they did. They return to ordinary work, raising families, blending into the peace they fought to restore. When asked about the mission, Runneberg once said softly, "We didn't think about heroism. We thought about doing our duty. At Vemork, the ruins of the old plant still stand, a museum now overlooking the same frozen gorge where the saboteurs once crept through the night. Visitors can see the cables, the pipes, and the narrow bridge where history hung by a thread. The echoes of that night seem to linger in the air, the crunch of boots on snow, the whispered command, the faint hiss of a fuse. The heavy water sabotage remains one of the most daring acts of resistance in World War II, an operation carried out not by armies, but by a handful of ordinary men who refused to surrender their country or their future. They fought not with numbers, but with nerve, not for glory. The war was over, but the silence that followed was not peace, it was memory. The mountains of Telemark, once alive with the footsteps of saboteurs, now lie quiet beneath blankets of snow. The hydro plant at Vemork stands hollow and still, its pipes cold, its turbines motionless. Yet, if you stand there long enough, you can almost hear it. The faint crackle of a fuse, the breath of men in the dark, the whisper of history changing course. In the years that followed, the truth of Germany's atomic ambitions began to surface. When Allied forces captured Heisenberg and his team in 1945, they discovered that the Nazi nuclear project had never come close to building a working bomb. Yet the Allies had no way of knowing that then. For them, every lead, every barrel of heavy water, every rumor could have been the spark that turned the war into something far worse. The raids on Vemork, Freshman, Gunnerside, and the sinking of the Hydro were not just sabotage missions. They were acts of preemptive salvation. The men who carried them out didn't just destroy machines, they destroyed possibilities. In 1948, the Norwegian government honored the saboteurs. Medals were given, speeches made, but for the men themselves there was little celebration. Joachim Runneberg rarely spoke about what he'd done. When journalists pressed him, he would smile quietly and say, "We were just lucky." Knut Haukelid returned to a quiet life as an engineer. He often walked the mountains where he once hid from patrols, his footprints mixing with those of tourists who would never know whose path they followed. They were not men who sought fame. They were men who answered a call. Over the decades, their story passed from whispers to history books, from history to legend. In the 1960s, a film called The Heroes of Telemark brought their mission to Hollywood. Dramatized, romanticized, but the core remained true. Beneath the fiction was a fact. A small team of Norwegians, armed with courage and conviction, changed the outcome of a global war. Today, the heavy water plant at Vemork is a museum. The rooms where Ronneberg and his men placed their charges are preserved behind glass. Visitors can stand where they stood, look through the same windows that once framed a world at war, and feel the gravity of what was risked that night. Outside, the Norwegian flag flies high above the gorge. The wind carries its echo down the cliffs, across the river, into the valley below. Generations later, schoolchildren still learn the names of those saboteurs. Their faces, once hidden by frost and darkness, are now etched in bronze. The story has become part of Norway's national identity, a reminder that freedom often depends on the courage of the few. But history, like the snow, covers and reveals in layers. Long after the war, when archives were opened and scientists spoke freely, a question lingered. How close had the Nazis truly come? Some say they were years away, others argue they stood on the edge of discovery. Whatever the truth, one thing remains certain. Without heavy water, there could be no chain reaction, no reactor, no weapon. And it was in that narrow space between what might have been and what never was that the saboteurs changed the course of history. Every world war is a storm, and every storm has its moments of quiet defiance, places where ordinary men and women stand against impossible odds. The Vemork raid was one of those moments. Imagine it again, the frozen plateau, the night sky heavy with snow. 9 shadows moving through the dark, hearts steady, breaths shallow, the weight of the world on their shoulders. No one will remember their voices, no one will see their faces, but the echo of their courage will remain, carried on the wind of those mountains forever. It began with a few drops of liquid, clear and still, hidden in metal tanks beneath a fortress of ice. It ended with the world spared from a darkness it could scarcely imagine. The Heavy Water Sabotage was more than a mission. It was a statement that tyranny, no matter how vast, can be undone by courage, that the smallest flame can outshine the coldest night. And as the final snows of winter fall over Vemork, the land remembers. It remembers the footsteps that crossed the ice, the sparks that lit the night, and the silence that followed when the world took one breath closer to peace.